Hello and welcome to Tullahoma's Cooking. I am your host, Kelly Lepchinsky, and today we're going to do something a little out of the norm for this program. We're going to be working with seafood. Now, before we start, let me tell you the inspiration for this dish. As we're recording, I am in rehearsals for Steel Magnolias at the South Jackson Performing Arts Center, and that script is surprisingly loaded with references to food. Now, you probably know the most famous reference, which is to a red velvet armadillo groom's cake. We're not making that. There are also references to things like pecan tassies. Well, there are a lot of references to sweet things, but we've just come off the holidays. We've had our pecan tassies, we've had our cakes. We're hoping for something a little savory. And this play is set in Louisiana. There's a line where my character, Ouiser, says that she's going to bring her shrimp meat pies to an open house at the Eatonton's place. Now, the cast had a reaction to that line. Shrimp meat pies? What are those? Well, we decided we'd try to find out, and we're going to do it here today. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm finding out right along with you. Unless you already know, you might already know. But me, this is going to be my first time making anything like this. I've got my ingredients already ready to go, and we're just gonna wing it. You're coming right along with me. We're hoping for a good result at the end. Now, we've done some similar types of things on this program, so we're hoping it doesn't go awry, but stay with us, we'll find out. Now, I do like to have this light on. We're gonna start off by sauteing an onion. This is one medium yellow onion, and I've got a tablespoon of butter already in this pan. Now, if I'd thought ahead, I could have turned that oven on and gotten it melted down just a little bit. But we'll get that going and saute our onions. Now, while that's coming up to heat, let me tell you a little bit about these ingredients that we've got laid out here. One of the things you know about Cajun cookings, or should know about Cajun cooking, is the holy trinity of flavor. The holy trinity is always onion, celery, and bell pepper. Now, in this case, it's going to be roasted red bell pepper. Now, if you are a purist and you are really interested in doing this all yourself, you go right ahead and get some red peppers and roast them up. But we're trying to make this a relatively quick meal. I bought some Mazzetta roasted red pepper bell strips, and then bell pepper, and then cut them right up, and we'll just be adding them in as we're ready for them. Now, while we're waiting for our onions to sweat down just a little bit, I'm going to turn that heat up just a little more. You also add about a tablespoon of olive oil to your butter and your onion. Now, I don't really have any idea how much I just put in there. I just kind of eyeballed it to cover my onions as they come up to heat. And once we have this good to go, nice and softened, we'll be ready to add the other parts of our trinity, that celery and that roasted red pepper. Now, I think we've got a good coating starting here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that celery in. The celery also takes a little bit of time to cook down. Now, this celery was, I think it was about a half a cup. Really, it only called for one stem, one rib of celery. But for me, that just did not quite look like enough. I went ahead and made a half a cup so it matched my onion. And we're just going to let those cook down a little bit there. And then the next thing, I've already told you, the roasted red pepper. I have not tried this particular brand before, but I really liked the idea of not having to do a cooking show on roasted red peppers before I needed the roasted red peppers. So they are good to go, and we're going to go ahead and put those in. Now, this is also a half a cup of roasted red peppers, and because I bought them in a liquid, I just drained that liquid out, kept it in there to keep the other guys good for going into the fridge as we save the rest of those for a future recipe. And already this looks scrumptious, and we haven't even done anything but the trinity. We've got these beautiful colors right here, the red, the yellow onion that's looking very white in the pan, and some celery green. Oh, that's so pretty. Now, what that really needs to do is sweat down a little bit. But it's got enough moisture from the butter and from the olive oil that we can go ahead, I think, and we've still got some butter on our stirrer here, that I think we can go ahead with the seasonings. Now, you'll notice I don't usually have this many seasonings laid out. This calls for a lot of flavor. But what was interesting to me in reading the recipe is that, I'll give you an example, allspice is in this. I had to buy allspice. That's not something I use. But it only calls for a pinch of allspice. So I start prepping up all of my spices, and I don't know what you consider a pinch, but half of what they've given me as ingredients for this look like a pinch to me. There's almost nothing that's over 1/4 of a teaspoon. Now I'm going to do it according to the recipe because this is our first time, and shrimp is a delicate meat, so it may just be that they were very light and delicate with the seasonings because you didn't want to overpower the shrimp. And I don't want to test that theory on the first time out. So we've got these coming to a nice temp. And we're going to go ahead and start adding these seasonings. Now I'll tell you how much, and I had to make a cheat sheet for this to tell you how much of everything because there is so much. So this is our Old Bay seasoning, you know, a classic seafood seasoning, and that is 1/4 of a teaspoon. The next one is cayenne, and they were really stingy with the cayenne in this recipe. This is 1/16 of a tablespoon. I'm going to stick with it until we know what it tastes like, but I imagine that's something that I would adjust the second time I do this. Paprika is the next one. That is 1/4 of a teaspoon right there. And then the pinch of allspice. I mean, what, 1/16 again, I guess is about what that comes out to. It's roughly equivalent to my cayenne. I pinched it in there. We'll see what happens. And then pepper. Pepper is next. And again, this is an eighth of a teaspoon. I start most of my recipes with 1/4 teaspoon to begin with. So I'm very surprised at how light these seasonings are. But we're going to trust the process. Oregano, on the other hand, you get a full teaspoon of oregano. Boy, that's some generous stuff there. However, I do start to smell it. I smell all those spices working in there with our onion and our pepper and our celery, and there we go. Now you can sort of see, I hope, as I tilt the pan, how that's all getting nice and coated, and you get that sort of an orange coating from all the cayenne and paprika that we've added in here. And we are going to let that cook in a little bit before we add a tomato and some chicken stock. Now the recipe suggests fish stock if you have it. That is not something that is ever in my kitchen, but if you have it, this is a good time to use it. If you don't, if you're like me and you have chicken stock for days, that is a 100% acceptable substitution, and it is exactly what we are going to be doing here today. So we're going to add in, the recipe says 1 tomato. It also says 1 cup. Now 1 Roma tomato, which I had here to make guacamole, which I will do later, 1 tomato wasn't quite enough, so I cut up 2 Romas to get to a full cup of tomato. And we'll just throw that in there, get all this nice and mixed up and coated with those spices. This already looks pretty tasty to me. And then 1/4 cup of that meat stock, shrimp or fish, right there on top. And that's not much either, 1/4 cup. You're not going to weaken what little spice you have put in there, but there are a lot of different spices adding up. So we let that now cook a little bit until some of that liquid reduces. And while that's doing that, I'm going to take this back up to medium and let that reduce a little bit while I tell you a little bit about the shrimp. Now shrimp, when you get it not pre-cooked, at least in this case, I bought white shrimp. Now I have already cut this down, mainly because I have cats in this house and they were going crazy over the smell of seafood. We didn't want to see that here on this episode. But I'll give you an idea. I bought just regular, large shrimp, peeled, deveined. They did come with the tails on. I took those off and then just gave them a little chop. Just dice them up basically. Just give them a little bite-sized treatment and throw them right in there. Now what this is 20 of the large shrimp. So there would be like 31 to 40, 45 of them in a pound, large shrimp. But now they're all cut up and bite-sized. And when this has reduced, we will add them into this mixture that we have got over here. Now I don't think we're quite ready for that, but I'm going to do a little fast forward with the reduce because I don't want to take a commercial break just yet. We want to go ahead and get this filling going. So I'm going to take just a breather, and the next thing you see will be the shrimp going into the pot. Okay, thank you for indulging me there. It took about 10 minutes to evaporate most of that liquid. That's what reducing is. It's just letting it cook until most of the liquid evaporates, because we want this to be a filling that goes into a pie crust. It's a hand pie. And so we don't want any liquid from this mixture to destroy the dough. So we just let that cook down. Now, while that happened, as it was coming to a simmer to reduce, I remembered an ingredient we didn't put in with the Trinity. Now, on the original recipe, it calls for a clove of garlic. That is the only variation that I'm making to this recipe, because why bother with one clove? I am just a stickler for putting in more than that. So I probably put in, I don't know, 3 or 4 cloves of garlic because I'm a big fan. I suggest you adjust accordingly as well. Now, those went in before all the liquid cooked off so that the garlic had some time to cook, and I just didn't want to stop and come back and show you that. So just add a clove or more of garlic in once you've got your Trinity in the pot. Now that is pretty liquid free, which means we are now ready to add the shrimp. Showed you the last one we cut up. We're also going to put some green onion in there, and then a little lemon and a little salt, and we'll let it cool so that we can make it into those little dough packets. So let me get this to a temp that I feel confident with. In fact, I might even, it doesn't really give you any instructions for adding them on top of all of this vegetable. And I kind of want them to hit the pan. I kind of want to see them cook since there's not a lot of liquid for them to cook in. So I'm just moving the vegetables out of the way a little bit and getting my shrimp in there. Now it shouldn't take long. You only want your shrimp to become pink, that recognizable pink of cooked shrimp. And that's all you're really looking for here. So we're going to get those in the pot, mix them around a little bit. Now I think it was a good idea, actually, that I separated them from the vegetables, even though it didn't say to do that, because those seasonings altogether, that paprika, that cayenne, gives a red sort of cast to what's in here. It's really hard to tell when a white shrimp has turned pink when it gets covered in that red spice sauce. So I recommend doing what I just did. I didn't know that was going to be a good reason to do it, but it was a happy accident. So go ahead and make some room in your pot for your shrimp so you can see when they turn pink. And that's just going to take us a minute here. A little bit longer than I expected. I really, you know, when you throw them into a jambalaya or something that's a really high heat boiling with the liquid still in it, you tend to see them cook up very quickly. And with these cut into little bite-sized morsels, I thought they would come along a little bit faster than this, but hey, good deal. We love this. Now, you could see, I mean, you could sort of see, because they do have some of that spice on them, how they're turning color, how they're no longer white. I don't think they're quite pink enough yet, but we're going to go ahead with the next part of this recipe and add in 1 full stalk, except of course little stemmy things at the bottom, of a green onion. Get that green onion in there with all the rest of our good shrimp and veggies, and I'm just going to go ahead and mix it all together now. Because the other good thing about this is, even if you don't get your shrimp 100% cooked here, and you likely will, like I said, it doesn't take that long. I think we're coming along just fine. Even if you left a little on the plate though, once you've made these into hand pies, we're going to fry them. And so the insides will get cooked again. So this is yet another recipe that we're making where you can do your pre-cooking your filling, and then the entire result gets cooked again. We've had a couple episodes like that now that I think about it. All right, that's looking really, really tasty. Now, what we have to do now is, well, first of all, we want to give it a little spritz of lemon. We're going to give it a little, just a little zhuzh with some lemon there. And we're going to give it just a little zhuzh with some salt. If you remember, that was not one of the ingredients that we started with. So there you go. We're going to let all these flavors cook together and meld. But most of all, what we need to do is let it cool down, because we need to be able to fold these ingredients into our dough pockets to make the hand pies. So I'm turning off the heat. We're going to let that cool. And while it cools, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tullahoma's Cooking, and before we start dishing this out onto our dough, can we just take a moment to appreciate how beautiful that filling is. I put it on a plate, flattened it out a little bit to help it cool. Leaving it in a bowl would still leave it warm at the bottom, so helping it cool. I give it less than a half an hour to cool. I just walked away and got our dough. Now, the recipe for these has a recipe for making dough, and if you like to make your own homemade dough, your own pie dough, you go right for it. That is not what I wanted to do for this episode, and I didn't see a reason to do it when 10-inch or 5-inch discs already exists. These are empanada dough rolls right here. They're good for frying, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing with our shrimp meat filling. So that's what we're going to use. Cut a little bit of time, make it a lot easier, and there you go, a nice little 5-inch disc. Now I'm going to move some of this out of the way so you can see what we're doing here. And maybe before we go on, I'll give that just another little zhuzh of lemon. All right, good deal. So I have chosen to put this on here with a disher. This is a number 50 disher. If you have dishers at home in different sizes, you'll see that you can get 50 scoops to, I don't remember what the full measurement is, to a quart of filling. I have no idea, but I wanted one that was roughly a tablespoon or a tablespoon and a half. This is the closest that I could come to that in my house. I think 1 is going to be just a little too little, 2 would be a little too much, so I'm going to try to be consistent with getting about 1.5 of these. And I just washed my hands during the break. I want to make sure that I am seeing shrimp in these bites, and the onions and the tomatoes and all of that good stuff in each bite. And then I'm just going to come in for another like half of this to make sure I've got this nice and filled. Now you just saw me reach into the water. I'm just getting the edges of the dough wet enough so that when I fold it over, they will sort of recognize each other and meet and seal. And that is the big thing, because as I mentioned, these are going to go into the fryer, and you definitely want your filling sealed into these and not coming out to create a little party of its own. So I'm just making sure that from the corners all the way forward, the dough has met. And then if you're fancy, you can start rolling and make little pie crust. I'm not going to take that time. So I'm just going to use a fork and kind of encourage that sealing I just did with my hand. I'm just going to crimp all the way around. And you can be neater about this. Put the tine right where the last one came out. But as long as you're crimping, look, if these are good, nobody's going to care what your crimps look like. But there you go. So there's one. And you just make several more of these. So we're going to do another one real quick. And while we're doing this, and I'm not sure if that's in the frame, but over there on my counter, I have a little tabletop fryer getting up to temperature, 350 degrees. That's the temperature we're going to fry these in. Now, I could put oil in this guy. You've seen me try that before. I don't like trying to regulate the temperature of frying oil when, once again, just like using the empanada dough, why would you do that when there's something that does that for you? Unless you don't have one of those, then obviously go for it. I have one of those. Not going to do oil on the stovetop. I'm going to let that guy go. You got down to 325. You might want to wait a minute before dumping the next empanada in there. Now in this case, it's empanada dough, but it's a shrimp meat. The shrimp meat filling. I think the sentence shrimp meat pies just struck a weird, it hits the ear weird. So when the cast heard shrimp meat pies, but it's shrimp meat. So easy enough. And here you go. We've got our second one there. Good to go. Well, not quite good to go yet, but getting there as I crimp all the way around. Again, making sure that it is sealed, that all of those fillings are going to stay inside, and maybe even turning over the bottom corners just to give them a 2-layer seal there. Okay. Well, we've got plenty more of those to do, but you see the process now. It's just a matter of getting all that filling into all of those little dough discs. And so I'm going to do that. And we're going to come back when the fryer is up to heat, get them in there. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Tullahoma's Cooking. Now, what I did in the break, I finished wrapping up those 10 discs, just the 10 discs of empanada dough. Now, you saw I've got another package right here, and it would probably take 2 packages to get through all the filling that we made. Now, here's an interesting thing about an empanada, anything like this, is that that filling is probably delicious all on its own. You don't have to necessarily make a hand pie unless you want a hand pie. That is a lot of work for something that is basically an appetizer or a snack. But you're not going to fry your filling. You're going to fry the dough in the filling, and that's going to make it something completely different. Now, I did have to take the break because even though I had set my fryer to preheat, it didn't. All those glowing things I said about it, right? Well, anyway, now it is up to heat, and we are ready to drop in 1 or 2. Now, mine is very small, and these are fairly large, so I might try just 1 to start with and see if there's room. I'm just going to drop it right in to the hot oil. And I know you can't see into that. We can see it bubbling. You might be able to hear it bubbling. Got that? I'm basically looking for it to float. And as soon as it floats a little bit, I know that it's probably cooked on the one side. I will flip it over to get to another side, the other side, and we'll get to a nice light golden brown. It does look like in this pan size, I'm only going to fit them 1 at a time. Again, if you're doing it in your own pot at home, you might be able to get in several at a time, or you might have a bigger deep fryer than I have. I don't deep fry very often at all. In fact, I have done more deep frying for this show than I think I have in the last 10 years. There it was. It just came up and flipped over, and I didn't think to grab myself some tongs, but it came up. I was going to turn it over and stick it right back in there. Now you could tell that was not the least bit brown, but I'm flipping it over because it came to a float. And so we're going to let that keep going. Now I think I may have had some water on this, which is what you're hearing react right now. Oil and water, not friends. So we'll just put the lid on that and see if it quietens down any. Now when your empanada, your shrimp meat pie is complete, you will want to serve it with a lemon wedge. And that's really it. That's all you're doing. You're waiting for this guy to come out fried. You're waiting to see him come out a nice golden brown. And then he'll be ready to go. He'll be ready to eat. Now, the recipe didn't suggest eating it with anything other than a lemon wedge. I'm trying to think if there's anything that on the side I would really want with shrimp and vegetables, or any kind of a dipping sauce you'd want with that. But I guess nothing's coming immediately to mind. I think we're just going to wait and taste it as the recipe calls for. Now, you can see right now, you're getting a little bit of bubbling. It's not quite golden brown yet, but we are getting some bubbling from the empanada dough. And I should mention now, I fried some other things. We've done egg roll wrappers before on this show, and we did the, what did we do? The Mexican taco, I think. But, I'm sorry, the Mexican taco. But this is a dough I have not worked with before. So judging when it's done, I still am just, like I said, going to wait for that golden brown. Now, so far our seal has worked really nicely. I didn't try to get too fancy with those, but I did decide while I was finishing up the last few of these that I wanted to go back and crimp both sides, not just the one side that was down already. I went back and flipped them over and put the little fork marks down on both sides of them. Now here is what we can do while we're waiting. When that puppy comes out, we're going to want to let some of that grease drain. And I have here your standard baking sheet. This is a half sheet right here, and a little grid that will work perfectly for letting the oil drip off. I'm going to take a look at how we're doing there. Now it feels, to the touch of the spoon, that feels pretty solid. That feels like it might actually be golden brown enough, and you can definitely see the difference between the raw one that went in and the one that's in there now. But for some reason, I just feel like that needs a little bit more time. So we're going to give that to it. We can give a little more zhuzh. If you're not going to make the next 10 discs, this is actually a really interesting thing about this recipe, is that it will keep for a couple days no matter what stage you're in. You can have this leftover and make it on pasta tomorrow, have a totally different dish. You can just store this and make some more, fill some more, and fry some more discs tomorrow. You can fill all the discs and put those in the fridge, and they'll be good to fry tomorrow. So it's a great make-ahead dish from everything that I'm seeing thus far. Okay, I'm calling that one good to go. We're going to dump that out there and stick another one into our hot oil. And as I mentioned, regulating the temperature. I don't want to stick that one in just yet because I had that going with the top open and I lost some of my 350. So that one is not, it's not quite up to heat to bring this one into the heat yet. So we're going to let that come back up. Now, yeah, that does look pretty good, doesn't it? It does look like it crisped up pretty well. We're just letting that drip, that drain just a little bit there. I'm going to let my fryer come back up to heat. Throw a couple more of these into the fryer. You've seen the process once. I'm going to do it a few more times. We'll come back and see how it came out after this. And welcome back to Tullahoma's Cooking. It is the moment of truth. I have completed 4 of Ouiser's shrimp meat pies, and they are a Louisiana treat we are about to try. Now, it says to sprinkle them with a little bit of salt when you serve them, and give them a little, serve them with a lemon wedge, which I assume you want to give another little zhuzh to the outside. And there we go. Now these just came out of the fryer, so they could be a little bit warm. Just prepare for that. Okay, they look good. Okay. When I said earlier it was a lot of work you might not want to do, I take that back. It's a lot of work that was totally worth it. That filling, we've got plenty left over, is great. But something about crunching into that fried dough and getting to that nice, spicy, meaty filling, yeah, that was worth it. And honestly, that's not as small as you might think. Okay, that actually is half a meal. I don't think you would eat a whole plate of 4 of these at one sitting. Excuse me. So yeah, that's actually really, really tasty. I'm really glad that we did this. See, you came along with me and we came out with something really nice. Now, that said, I rolled 10 of these. I'm probably not going to finish 4 in this setting. I wouldn't finish another 4 in another setting, and then I'm going to be tired of them. So if you're just at home alone and you're not cooking for a whole family and you have half of that left over, you can think of plenty of other things to do with it. You can serve it, as I said earlier, on a pasta, or go ahead and get some rice and sausage and throw it into a jambalaya. It is a good starting base for a lot of other things, but it's also really good this way. If you do fried foods, give it a try. We'll see you next time here on Tullahoma's Cooking.